Hello, goldfish without attention spams! Yummy. I'm Kyo Kusagani, bringing you my second greatest accomplishment in the realm of shoot-em-ups. Parodius Da, the de facto way to bring out the seventh human sense everyone has, nonsense! Everyone has it despite our best efforts to pretend we don't. When a group of madmen embrace their inner madness to channel it into entertainment, we get Dino Rex. But we also get Parodius. In my opinion, one of Konami's greatest projects yet. A monument of gibberish that leaves its players scratching their heads before laughing them clean off. Who needs an intergalactic adventure when you've got babes and super duper sumo slammers crushing you with their butts? That's an adventure. If you'd like to watch this video without commentary, you can click the link in the description below. While the goofy, unfiltered, cartoon-like presentation would get a game noticed, in contrast to any standard shooter, Gradius really paved its place in gaming by not skimping on anything that made the Gradius series great. It'll kick your ass if you underestimate it, so your senses will be tested under this distracting assault. Perhaps you'll need more sense than ever thanks to the controversial rank system embedded into the difficulty. But it's not going to kick in until later on in the game. It's not so obvious at first, so we'll talk a little bit about the colorful cast of characters. Stage 1 is a decent introduction that's relatively tame compared to everything else the game has to offer. It is a pirate alcove during the golden years of piracy, and it starts getting wacky the second we see the mid-boss. This is where most people would figure out that the new mystery option right before shield is a power down. Thus, if you select that, you lose all of your power-ups instantly as a nasty surprise. But it also reduces any penalties you got from accepting other power-ups. I'll explain the rank system when it really affects your gameplay. I don't know how many lives this cat pirate ship has remaining, but surely I've deducted it by one. Anywho, I used the Big Viper in my run, which is the standard Gradius power-up system that was there since the beginning. The game is balanced around this shot type, but even now Konami was trying out new weapons that were not used in previous Gradius games before. Twin B is the new one in particular. Octopus is a creative way of getting the Lord British, dual missiles, tail gun, and ripple laser into the fray. And then Pentaro is also trying some new ideas out as well, but Twinbee has the most new ideas introduced in this game out of all the weapons in the series. They incorporated Twinbee's playstyle from the same series of the same name, thus giving you a three-way shot since he does not have a traditional missile. He has a boxing glove that can penetrate through all enemies, and thus the boxing glove is one of the most powerful things you can shoot in this game. And thus to compensate for enemies that come from behind, he gets a tail gun instead. The Penguin and Twinbee's options also retract back into their ships if you stand still for a second, unlike McViper and Octopus, who have options that let you place them whenever you feel like it. And that's important for the character balancing in this game. As far as what characters you should be using, Twinbee and Octopus are considered the best in this game because their triple-way shots and their tail gun compensates for every angle possible. Whereas I prefer the Big Viper because people demanded that I play this game with Big Viper when I first started to distinguish this replay from the rest, and because they find the Big Viper to be cool. You can't mess with perfection. Unless the Big Viper would be a A tier or a B tier if you put the characters on a tier list. If Octopus and Twinbee are S tier, Big Viper is B or A tier. He does not have a projectile that can shoot behind him, but to compensate for that, he can place his options where they need to be. You can put the option in the bottom or top of the screen where back enemies appear, and the double or the laser usually does a good job taking care of them. The laser's hitbox extends a little bit behind or a little bit above and below what you think they would. It's more forgiving than it seems. Also employing a minor scoring strategy here. All the clowns that belch out bubbles at you because they had way too much to drink are worth 100 points a pop, so you can sit in between them and farm plenty of points for them in order to improve your score and get your extra life a little bit faster. You don't get endless extra lives unlike other Gradius games, though. Thus, another factor that contributes to its difficulty. This part highlights just what makes Parodius so beautiful a satire. If you knew absolutely nothing about the Gradius series, this would just be a beautiful pole dancing babe that is extremely well animated and really funny to have a Godzilla-sized chick trying to crush you underneath her heels. But if you knew the end of Gradius 2, this was the final sequence in that game. The parodies are funny without any context whatsoever, and that's what makes any good comedy good. You don't need, like, the context of every single joke, like the Joker from Batman would say. If you have to explain the joke, then there is no joke. This game's humor mostly works without the references, and there are a couple of jokes where you need to have played the Gradius series to understand them. But for the most part, this game stands excellently on its own, and they're bizarrely creative in their own right. Next up, coming up, a little fun fact for you guys. This is Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam is profiteering off of all the babes dancing in the spider chamber. So we need to destroy him for profiteering off of that beautiful lady. This boss is actually the reason why this game did not release in the United States in 1990. This game got a European release on the Nintendo and Super Nintendo, but Konami were worried that Americans would be offended that Uncle Sam is being brought down a peg or two. If the game were to be re-released on Hamster's Arcade Classics archives nowadays, most people I've talked to don't consider that a big deal. They consider it really funny because Uncle Sam has to be the most patriotic tasting chicken dinner I've ever tasted in my entire life. I bet he would be delicious, like a well-done steak on the barbecue of justice. Hey, don't blame me for writing that one. I stole that one from the Crimson Chin and his butt-shaped head. This is one of my favorite stages in the game because it is delightfully childish and outlandish, with tons of pumpkin-shaped goblins trying to eat through all the walls and gobble up all the candy. They're going to have to spend an enormous day on the bathroom. Like Halloween every single day, the joys of Halloween every single day for the rest of your life. And this is also where people are going to start noticing the rank system. Konami's way of catering to newcomers and fixing the impossible checkpoints Gradius 3 had, while keeping the game difficult for professional players. Every single time you take a power-up or clear a stage without dying in this game, the game goes up one difficulty level, and it stays that way until you die and deactivates all the penalties. Thus, every single time you take an extra option, and you take a power-up with laser or double activated, all the bullets are going to get slightly denser, and they're going to be a little bit faster every single time. It's a very gradual build-up until it becomes especially noticeable. This is around the time where if you took every single power-up without limiting yourself, the game would start to kick your ass here if you're not an experienced player. If not here, you definitely notice it in Stage 4. Thus, the smartest way to play this game, but I'm not going to get that bell. I did not get that bell. It was not worth losing a life this early when the rank was so low. I had plans for that later. I'll explain the bell systems I'll explain the bells in the next stage. As I was saying though, what you want to do is deliberately evade taking power-ups until they're absolutely necessary to take, and that makes the game much more in line with Gradius 1 and Gradius 2's fairness. As long as you're limiting yourself and not taking too much that you can handle, the game is significantly fairer than Gradius 3 ever was. while still being difficult because you have to consider that extra layer of strategy. Some people absolutely hate this level of game design, or this idea. It was especially popular in Battle Garega, where you had to deliberately suicide in order to manipulate rank to your liking for scoring, so you spawn extra enemies and get more points if you want higher rank, or lower it if you're just going for a pure survival clear. Same deal applies here, but in this case there's no reason to jack up rank unless you just want to challenge yourself. Thus, I make it a plan to deliberately die on this stage, and specifically, the boss. If you die on a boss, the game will reduce rank more than if you died normally. So, the way I clear this game is I deliberately blow 1 life in stage 4 or stage 5 in order to reduce the rank more than usual, and thus bring the bullet speed back to what you're seeing right now. All the patterns are reasonable when the bullets are going this slow. And I put it on the same line as Gradius too, as far as how difficult it is. It's a super fair game that occasionally pushes it with the checkpoints, but as long as you are paying attention and predicting the suicide bullets in the later stages, you'll do just fine. You won't ever call bullshit on this game most of the time, unlike Gradius 3's Ice Cube stage. It's a well-balanced game overall. Later Parodius games, like Dokuju Parodius and Sexy Parodius, would redo the rank system in order to make it a bit harder to manipulate. It's still possible, but you need to use different tricks, and it's not as easy to do. Most of the power-ups only add 1 extra layer of difficulty when you take them, but speed up is the thing you have to avoid most in this game. Speed up is especially bad to take because that gives you 2 extra levels of rank instead of 1, and that's permanent until you die. That does not wash away as easily as any of the other power-ups do, so taking a second speed up too early could make or break your run. I only ever take my extra speed-ups once I reach the Ice Palace in Stage 7. I was not planning on dying to that. My missile was out, and I made a genuine mistake there. And thus that's where the rank system helps newer players and keeps it hard for experienced ones. This is a good time to talk about the bells, because they're also designed to help you recover from checkpoints. Bells give you points when you pick them up when you're yellow, but if you keep shooting them, they change colors, and they give you a variety of very useful effects. The most useful one being the green one, which gives you invulnerability, thus outright letting you bypass a checkpoint you're having trouble with if you are lucky enough to get one to show up. Thus, it's a lot easier to recover from checkpoints in this game than earlier ones, and it proves Konami was trying their best in order to rebalance these games so they're not as lopsided and unfair as Gradius 3 is. We're back to the Gradius games being brilliantly designed again, like most top plans and the earlier games in the series. Hence why I always rated this one way higher than the earlier games. Gradius 3 is a game that I'll get to in the future. It's very ambitious and has a lot of excellent qualities to it, but this game has none of the jank and none of the glitches that make that one a miserable experience. We're demonetized now, guys! The Sumo Man took off his clothes, and now, we're gonna be demonetized and cancelled. Pack your bags, my YouTube career is over. I believe the, Japanese text down there might say censored, if that was my guess. Wouldn't hurt to pull my phone out and check that out one of these days. Oh! And this is also the English version of the game, but it did not receive a translation until it came to home consoles. Everything was just kept in its original Japanese text. And most of the text isn't necessary in order to get the humor in the first place. Here we have a piss take on Konami's biggest competition at the time, being IREM. Every single game needed an obligatory giant battleship, so why not have the giant battleship wiping his snots all over you like a rude-mannered dinner man. And again, anyone that's familiar with shoot-'em-ups would recognize R-Type, but even without familiarity with R-Type, the giant battleship stage is still an insanely cool trope, which is as to why developers kept recycling it. R-Type is a game that I still need to get to one of these days. Even though it's not the hardest game in the world, it deserves to be recorded and replayed anyway because it's a damn cool game all these years later. They say mockery is the sincerest form of flattery, and that couldn't be any more true in this case. You want another example of generous hitboxes working to your advantage? Look at the way my missiles are actually knocking the bell out of the wall here. The missiles' hitboxes are way bigger than they look, so they also learn from their hitbox predicaments of Gradius 3 as well. The hitboxes in these games just got better overall after that absolute disaster. I suppose if Konami had any other competition, aside from IREM, I believe their second biggest competition would be Psycho, who was up and starting back then. Shin Nakamura was still working at Video System, but it wouldn't be too much longer before he branched off to make Sonic Wings 1, because Sonic Wings 1 was the year 1991, just 1 year after this. That would provide serious competition for Konami as well, since their series was also as equally as wacky as this was sometimes. I'm especially a fan of Gunbird. The blue bells give you a bomb, and the red bell, or the orange bell, bronze bell, whatever color you see it as, gives you a barrier that deflects bullets on the screen for a certain amount of time. Whereas the white one gives you a bullet-canceling megaphone that lets your character spout gibberish and Einstein formulas. There is such a thing as intelligent stupidity after all. This game is the thesis for that. Or maybe they could have developed this game like Zezek, and they literally got ideas from the Chuck E. Cheese ball pit. I did not make that up, by the way. The producer for Zezek said that the stage ideas came from completely random sources out of nowhere. The second stage of Zezek literally is a Chuck E. Cheese ball pit. In the unlikely event that we ever get a new Parodius game, I would love to actually see a Chuck E. Cheese ball pit level, or a Chuck E. Cheese ball pit planet. Jalico's Game Paradise sorta did a level like that, where you go through the arcade and fly inside the crane machines in order to fight giant plushies. That was really creative as well. The next level is various people's favorite level in this game. Some of my audience wonders why Konami never entered into the pinball bracket, since they were so heavily invested into the West at this time. The West was half of Konami's revenue source back then, thanks to the success of games like Ninja Turtles, and they also entered into the pachinko market in the year 1990 as well. This might be their tribute to the West, because we had a Las Vegas stage earlier with Vegas show performers and clowns, and now we're in the insides of a giant pinball machine that makes the roulette happen way more frequently. The weapon roulette was designed to trick you into taking that power down, or letting you select whatever you want. The developers put that in there in order to get people to get mad right in front of the cabinets, and it's super effective. But it's not random in the slightest. If you time it good enough and press the power-up button on the thing you want, you can just select any power-up you want, period. That means you can take laser whenever you need it, or you can take an extra option right on the fly.
Roulette capsules are predetermined. You will always get a roulette from the same capsules every time. If you studied long enough, you'll be able to avoid all of the roulettes spread throughout this stage. Beneficial if you're worried about your timing being off, or selecting a speed-up. I would like to thank Plasmo and plug his channel in the corner for the info. He's the only player that's ever cleared 2 loops of Hong Kong Dompash with 1 credit, making him a shoot-'em-up god worthy of your attention. This commentary would have been less accurate without his help. The pinball aesthetic even extends to the boss, the Viva Core, Core of Life, where every barrier you break flashes large numbers of points at you, making you feel good like a real pinball machine would. It's just as obnoxious, it's just as irresistible, and it is very beneficial to your score. The myriads of bells and the 5,000s and 10,000s of points you get from the core would make this the most proficient place to farm for points if it weren't for an exploit at the end of the game, rendering this inefficient. In case you couldn't tell, the rest of this video's commentary wasn't shot live on broadcast. The rest of this video is traditionally edited with hand-cut audio clips. This is the level where I stuttered and blanked out during the live commentary. So this was the point I intended to start editing to keep things moving without any caveman talk. Unga bunga! Yet, that also gave me the opportunity to go back and correct the biggest misinfo I shared during the pinball stage. Everything else, I felt genuinely happy about and didn't feel the need to edit retroactively. While I may be content, I want to hear from you, the viewer, on what you think of this experiment. Do you think improvised live banter is just as informative as rehearsed methodical commentary? And if not, what needs to be done differently to elevate it to the same level as my usual work? I'm really looking forward to hearing the feedback because there's a lot I like about the live format. Only having to fill half a 40-minute time frame with manual audio splices is a blessing. Especially when I do this as a hobby and not a full-time job. By the way, did you notice a pig mixed in with all the bunny girls? 3 years before this, Konami released Nightmare 3, Shalom. Your classmate gets turned into a lady pig when you get sucked into a haunted video game with her. I'd assume that's a pretty deep cut for big Konami geeks, but then again, I don't live in Japan and I wasn't born in the 80s, so I have no clue how successful the obscure Nightmare series was. Nightmare 2 was enough to inspire the creation of a more famous game called La Mulana. It just goes to show, no matter how obscure a game is, if it's built solidly enough, it could very well be the basis for someone's creativity. Heaven knows if it weren't for the original Gradius, I wouldn't be half as interested in shoot-em-ups as I am today. I'd imagine that was starting to lose some relevancy in the year 1999, with the 8-bit Nintendo being old hat at that point. Speaking of Nintendo, the Famicom version of this is almost a completely different game using the same graphics. The home ports of these games were unique experiences that share some aspects between arcade to console, whereas the PC Engine ports were closer to the arcade. This lovely lady summoning cupids is a good indicator of how high the rank is. The chubby diapered cherubs are not shooting at me when I burst their bubble, or retaliating with suicide bullets, indicating I'm in pretty good shape for the hardest leg of the game. Rank is nice and low. If these guys are shooting back, then you can make do with deliberately losing a life on an earlier boss to make the next level a little less ridiculous. Unless you're one of those lunatics going for a 2-loop clear. If you are out of your mind, then you've probably already planned out a careful and methodical path to keep your shield alive at all times. Alright, welcome to Hell. The Ice Palace is the hardest stage without question for a number of reasons. Like hell froze over. From this point forward, I allow myself the second speed up since it's practically mandatory due to the stage's gimmick. I also start allowing myself to use shields since you're always running the risk of ruining your paint job or getting your tongue stuck on the sharp ice walls. Like so. You start getting sniped immediately, and the shields are an effective countermeasure for the lack of free space. I should mention the walls are fairly forgiving in this game, which is a relief. Just like Gradius 2, you have to be halfway wedged inside a wall before it'll actually kill you. That can assist you in making hectic dodges. Oh boy, here we go. It's time to go swimming. Being underwater slows you down one entire speed level. This is why I finally took that speed up. The ship's rusting up from water corrosion. But at least we managed to avoid drowning. What's the octopus and Pentaro's excuse? Pentaro's a penguin. He's supposed to be an expert swimmer. A mesmerizing school of fish tries to school you on the effects of getting capped in the head. Boy howdy, dodging school is in session. They always shoot suicide bullets right after their deaths, regardless of how high the rank is. Proving practice with continues isn't a waste of time. You need to be able to overcome this difficult section in the first place before you can even consider doing it with more claustrophobia. Unless you're using Twinbee, watch your back just as closely as your front, even with a shield activated. You can be shot from off-screen if a fish just left it without being loaded out of memory. Now, since it's relevant, let's pour one out for the unsung hero of shoot-'em-up intensity. Slowdown! Perhaps the most misunderstood element of action game design, especially in the 90s and 80s. The game's struggle to handle its own gorgeousness provides a powerful perk to the player, letting them matrix dodge what would otherwise be a steaming wall of death. While this is usually unintentional and caused by poor optimization or deadlines to get a game out on time, see Double Dragon 1 for poor optimization, other developers savvy with time management deliberately use slowdown to balance a game's difficulty out. Cave Corporation did this in their games to make their bosses possible, while Konami very likely did this for the entirety of Gradius 3. None of the delicious details needed to be sacrificed, and the game continued to play smoothly since it's still targeting 60 frames per second, unlike many PS3 developers. Online lag is the bad kind of lag because it's actually eating your button presses and preventing your character from moving. Know the difference between slowdown and lag. This prickly pufferfish is problematic if you don't know the fine details. You want as much room as possible to dodge the needles, but if you're lined up horizontally, it'll try to move in to smooch you, making it much harder to dodge its wave of bullets. The trick is to keep moving up and down to stop it from advancing until it grows large enough to create a glaring safe spot in front of its face. One minor note, the needles have somewhat forgiving hitboxes. The back half of the spike, not the pointy end at the front, is what kills you. Up next is a crass fusion of the MSX with spooky Japanese folklore. Or a breath of fresh air after being submerged in hell for so long. Stage 9 is a celebration of Konami's formidable presence on MSX computers and the calm before the storm on the difficulty curve. In fact, Parodius actually started on the MSX, not in the arcade. Parodius, The Octopus Saves the Earth was released 2 years earlier in 1988. It's a completely separate game with unrelated stages. The MSX was actually still going strong in the year 1990, with Konami due to release Metal Gear 2 the same year. Its creators must have been proud it stayed the standard for a long time in Japan and Europe. This is based off the extra stage they added in Gradius 1 MSX. Extra content added to compensate for the jerky scrolling created by system limitations. Since it's a breather level, there isn't as much to see or talk about, so I fast-forwarded to keep my commentary lively. The intensity heats up again at the boss. If you can help it, try to have missile and as many options as possible going into the umbrella dance. It's not hard fully powered up, but this is a really bad place to die. If you're using Vic Viper or Octopus, park your options at the bottom of the screen so you can do enough damage to the umbrellas before they even reach you. This also makes it more likely to kill the skeleton that pops up every once in a while too. Try not to move around too much so your options don't get dislodged. The second boss of this area is nowhere near as difficult, being a withered old ghost lady. You just gotta avoid smoking by staying out of the smoke. Superman wouldn't say yes to a cigarette. To finish off the MSX themed level, I'm gonna go out and say it right now. Nemesis 3, The Eve of Destruction, or Gopher no Yabu Episode 2 is the best MSX game ever made. The biggest 8-bit Gradius adventure didn't even need MSX2 hardware. It ran on MSX1 compatibles. Some insane technological wizardry went into pushing magic out of aging hardware. I really look forward to showing that off when I one-credit clear it. Now, to choke the smoke. This is it, the final frontier. If you reach the first big step for Squid Kind, you're a good player, and the game darn well knows it. So, the moment you step foot here, the game will change its rank rules on the spot. From here on out, the game will assume you're fully powered up, no matter what your current power level is. There's no reason to hold back on anything except speed-ups anymore. Take every power-up you can get your hands on as fast as possible, and help yourself to every shield you can reach. Play it like a regular Gradius game. Go guns blazing with 4 clones. You've earned it, and you'll need it. This is straight up the last stage of Gradius 1. 1-to-1 layout. Just give it a comedic makeover with as much whimsy as the rest of the game. I always notice something new in the background every time I watch this part. I never noticed the penguins sweating on the 24/7 customer support line before. Or maybe they're flirting and they're pretending to work. You never really know. Not like you'll notice unless you're a spectator, since everyone is way more aggressive shooting you than Gradius 1, demanding you fall back on old, reliable strategies with some bell assistance. It's essential you have a weapon that can fire up for this part. The double, the triple, Octopus's 2-way missile, whatever floats your boat. It's also imperative you remember enemies come from behind, so you can kill them as quickly as possible. Parking your options in the upper left corner, or slightly adjacent to it, is good so you can speed kill any penguins trying to be sneaky. God help you if you die in this checkpoint, because it is middle corridor with enemies blocking the path. You'd have to straight up be shooting at them ahead of time, and then move afterwards, only destroying one row. Uh-oh! Here's that scandalous shower sequence everyone's been waiting for! Of course the bath water kills you.
We can't have naked spaceships washing up on YouTube. Thankfully, you're finally out of checkpoint limbo. Being outside the bathhouse is way easier than being stuck inside of it. Be on the top or the bottom. Personally, I prefer the bottom since my missiles are more effective like that. The only opponent left, aside from Loop 2, is another one of the hardest video game bosses ever made. I couldn't believe I survived. Such a butt clencher. I'm gonna let the mighty boss octopus speak for itself. If you have any extra lives remaining, you can deliberately crash into the wall to get a double KO for 100,000 points a pop. Meaning I could have reached 1 million if I didn't die a single time throughout the entire game. Shit, I'm happy with just getting through this super difficult endurance gauntlet. Before you Weisenheimers say anything about Loop 2, I know I'm gonna get demands for it. It would likely take an actual year to pull off Loop 2. Parodius becomes one of the hardest games ever made on the replay. I feel like I could at least feasibly get to Loop 2 Stage 3 with practice. And if you want to see that, pop into my Twitch channel when I go live every weekend. Don't say I didn't do anything nice for ya. With that, I'll end my commentary on one of the best Konami games ever made. I would much appreciate any donations if you liked what you saw. I wish you all peace and long life.